Some time ago, I had released a video with the name MuleSoft Circuit Breaker Custom API Manager Policy. I've received a comment on this message asking me to explain the template XML creation, the basics of a custom API Manager policy. How do you create a custom API Manager policy? In the video, I had taken some already solved examples, a Git repository, and started from there. In this video, I'll show you how to get started from scratch. How do you create the basics of it? How do you create a Mule project? How do you create an API Manager policy, custom policy project from scratch? For this, you search Mule custom policy on your browser. The first link that you get, that is MuleSoft custom policy workflow, gives you information on how to use the Maven archetype command over here to generate your custom API project. This project will contain a Mule flow, a Mule XML file with the name as template.xml and the contents as shown over here. Here you see HTTP policy, a proxy, a basic policy is shown over here. So we'll skip over this. Here is an example of a custom policy link. From there, you will copy this command, the Maven archetype command. Next, once you execute that Maven archetype command, it will generate, apart from the template XML file, it will also generate this configuration ML file. In this, you see the property names and property values, property types, etc. And let's continue. Some more examples. So if you configure the configuration YAML file as shown in the previous picture, you would be presented on API Manager with these checkbox buttons. Evaluate in the request, a Boolean expression, evaluate in response, a checkbox, a tick mark which says yes or no, true or false. And you get a field, a text field where you can type DWL expressions. Okay. Now, this dependency is the backbone on which you're building your custom policy. So the logic that you write will make use of this HTTP policy transform extension. This is a Mule plugin in the POM XML file. Read the documentation and you will have more understanding of what these things do. Here I'll only be covering the basics. You can write conditional logic using the if expression, whether it is true or false, whether it is ticked or not in the API manager. You can evaluate that inside the policy XML, template XML. With the handlebar flower brackets that you see over there. In order to upload the policy XML and the custom policy to Exchange, you need the credentials. Either you can use your own credentials, that is an individual user, or connected app credentials. If you use an individual user, username and a password, then that particular user should have MFA exception, which means they should not be bound by two-factor authentication. Instead, it is easier to use a connected app, client ID, client secret. Okay, so here I have copied the Maven archetype, removed the new line characters so that I can execute it on Windows command line shell, given it a name, my custom policy, and the group ID is my business group ID of my trial account. Once you run it on your command prompt, yeah, let me show again how I've copied the business group ID of my trial account. You'll see it on your AnyPoint platform as shown over here. So once you execute the Maven command, it will generate a folder, multiple files with the details as shown over here. Group ID is this, your business group ID. Artifact ID or the folder name is my custom policy. The version number is 100. This creates your template XML. Let's import that into AnyPoint Studio. It is a template XML. So this will not contain any Mule components that is visible in a graphical view. It only contains this configuration XML, which you can edit manually. Anything before line number 14, where it says execute next, will be executed before the Mule application is called. So line number 13, which is currently blank, is a place where you can write things that you want to execute before calling the Mule application. And after line number 14 is the section of code which will be executed after a Mule application is invoked. So we'll call the Mule application, it'll execute, it'll create some output, and then you want to add some more headers. In this line number 18, I've added a new header and I have transforming the body on line number 17 to enhance the behavior of your Mule application. So this line number 17, 18 gets executed in the API manager as a custom policy. The status code gets set to 201. The Maven archetype command also creates this policy YAML file as shown over here. I'll be modifying line number 11 to add my own parameters and variables. Copy the configuration property name from this page, paste it over here. Change the property name according to your naming convention. So this property is of type expression. We'll make it mandatory expression by setting line number 16 to false. We'll also change the line number 17 because it's an expression. You want to, in case you want to use a string, you can do that. Or in case you want to use an expression, you can make the change as I'm showing on screen, where the entire line number 17 value will be just the expression. You can concatenate strings, but you cannot concatenate expressions. Okay, so here, let's take a look at the POM XML file. Once again, yeah, so here on POM XML, you see distribution management on line 75. This ID you should pass through settings XML file, username and password, to publish your asset into Exchange. Connect app credentials has to be passed in settings XML file, which will have the same ID as line number 77. Once you do that, you can deploy this into Exchange. Currently, we see errors. Let's understand what the reason for the error is. The error occurred because of a old Mule Maven plugin, version 336. Let's change that to the latest one, which is compatible with our runtime. 400 is the Mule Maven version which I'll be using. Mule Maven plugin 400. You run the code, it executes with the 401 error. Now, with the client ID and client secret, you'll be able to investigate whether you have actually pushed the asset into Exchange or not. Here it says the 404 asset is not available. Let's push it once more. Policy jar file, policy definition YAML file, and policy POM file. All of these gets published. And we can view that in the browser by when you pass the client ID, client secret. You will see 409 error if the version is already available and you are pushing the same version again. So in that case, you'll have to increment the version number, the POM XML file on line number 9. Once you do that, you can view your assets. That is your API spec file, specification file, RAML file, your custom policy file, all of your assets in your account. You can view all the various versions on your exchange. You're able to download the Mule Java file, jar file, and the policy YAML file from Exchange if you want to do so. Now let's go to API Manager and assign our custom policy to our API. Select the version number that you're interested in. You can select an old version or the latest version, Supreme. Now you'll use the instance ID number shown over here as 2028 in your Mule application. Let's create a new Mule application. Importing the specification file from Exchange, and then give a API name and create my Mule API. The API is created with the default get method and the default get output message. I add the API auto discovery ID. I then use the client ID and client secret from API manager with these command line arguments in my run configurations so that this runtime manager gets linked with API manager of my trial account. Once you do this, you'll be able to debug your application and connect your runtime manager with API manager. Okay, we see a error. Let's investigate what the reason for the error is. So the policy is in conversation with this runtime, but it has caused an error because of incompatible Java version. So the policy transform Mule plugin that we have used is not compatible with Java 17. So let's find a compatible version. Version 3.2.0 is compatible with Java 17. So Mule HTTP policy transform extension, we need 3.2.0. So let's add that into our POM XML file of custom policy project, line number 90. Do this, publish the project, and then when you test, you'll be able to get the new HTTP header shown over here. And you get the new header because you have used it in your custom policy. I've set a new HTTP header and a new HTTP body. That is not the same as my Mule application body and HTTP header. Status code is getting populated as 201 and the body is getting populated from my custom policy. Here you see the value. Let's see if it is same as the body that I have in my Mule application during runtime. So at static time, it is hello world. Let's add a logger and see what the value is at runtime. This should also populate the same value. Add the expression to populate the payload in my console. And then let's test it once more. You can debug your application and link it with your API policy. You get the value as shown over here with custom status code, custom header, custom body. In the Mule application, it's getting logged as hello world. One, they both are different. So you're able to modify your response, modify the headers. And in this simple example, I've shown you how to create template XML by using Maven archetype. So this you build on top of it, and finally you create the circuit breaker policy. That's it for today.